Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux, and today we're taking a look at shooting Lego. We're going to be using some of the Lego that I've got out on display in my house, and I'm going to be using lasers to create some really cool lighting effects in a film noir type scene that we're going to set up using all of these buildings and minifigures. So let's get started. Before we even get started shooting, these models, as you might expect, have been up on my bookshelf for quite some time, and they've gathered quite a lot of dust in between all of the little studs on the Lego pieces. And we're going to need to give them a clean before we start setting up our shot and photographing them, because if you start shooting and then realise that they're dirty and they've got dust on them, it's a pain to try and remove it in post-processing in Photoshop. It's much better to try and get it as perfect as possible in the camera. So the way that I like to do this is use a brand new makeup brush, and the bristles on these are really soft, so you can get in quite rough around all of the little pieces of Lego, and that will get rid of the majority of the dust that you're seeing all over these things. So once you've got your models prepared, it's time to start thinking about how you want your shot to look. I'm going for a very gritty film noir look, dark and down at street level. So I'm going to focus it around our little protagonist here, who looks pretty angry, has his little gun in hand. So that means that I'm going to need to turn this into a faux street scene. We can do that by getting our camera nice and low down, and I'm going to set up our scene now so that you can see exactly what I'm going for. I've just picked you up so that I can show you around this setup a little bit easier and can see the whole thing. If you've seen our other macro photography tutorial, you'll notice that the camera's usually quite close into the setup. Here we want to be a little bit wider out, and the Tamron 90mm lens, if you set it further back, you can zoom it out a little bit. And that's what we've done. Our camera is over here, down level with the scene, so that it looks almost street level, which is going to work really well for our protagonist, who is sat down here on the edge of the cinema. With his little gun and his angry face. I've just twisted his head just off a little bit, because when you're shooting your minifigures, if you have them stood straight on, I don't think it's very creative. It works in some scenarios, but for something like this, I think it's a little bit more interesting that he's looking off to the side and holding his gun off to the side. And another little twist of the hand means that the gun is visible in the shot, rather than if you were shooting down the profile of the gun, you wouldn't necessarily know what it looks like, what a Lego gun looks like, and it might not be recognizable as a gun. For the background, we've got the pool hall, barbershop and detective's office in the background there, and they're going to be slightly out of focus just to have some separation between the foreground and the background, and the depth of field that we'll be using will separate those two parts of the image out from one another, so that the protagonist stands out next to the cinema, those guys will both be in focus at the front there. The most important part of shooting a scene like this, though, is going to be the lighting. It's a significant factor in film noir, and how they get those specific types of dark, grainy looks in their films is the lighting. So let's take a look at exactly how we're going to light this scene. At the moment, all of the light in the scene is coming from the studio lights that I'm using to light myself, but we're not going to be using those at all in the actual shot that we're going for, and that's because they just sort of fill everything quite evenly, and it's not very gritty, dark look that we're going for. What I want to try and do is light a lot of this scene as if it would be lit in an actual film, and that means using the lights that would be available in sort of in micro like this. So we've got things like the street lights that would be lit, the lighting inside the cinema, inside the pool hall, and all of the various little lights and things that are naturally found in the scene. I'm going to try and use those to make it look a little bit more real, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute when I bring out the Adaptalux Studio and the various flexible lighting arms. I'm going to put the studio here in the middle of the street, just around the corner from where our camera is actually sat, so that I can manipulate these lighting arms, get them into places where the camera can't see, but we can then see the light coming out of windows, and we're going to be using some lasers to get to those hard to reach places where a lighting arm would be spotted. So I'm going to get started just adding some light around this scene and turning off these main lights so that we can see what kind of result we've got. Let me give you a quick guided tour of what we've done here, because it looks a bit crazy with this, with the Adaptalux Studio, the big Kraken thing in the background. You can't actually see any of that from the point of view of the camera, so that's fantastic. What I've done is I've got a diffuse light over in the corner of the cinema here, and that's going to shine through to the street level and light our little protagonist here. And I've got another one back here. I've taken the skylight off the top of the detective's office and put a lighting arm through into there as well. You can't actually see that the roof of the cinema is missing in the shot that we're going for, so that's fine. Now the lasers. This is really interesting, and this is where I think it gives a shot like this the real convincing sort of real look, really. I'm using a laser lighting arm here, shining up to the lights underneath the cinema entranceway there, and another one over here coming to light the street lamp in the background. And I think both of those combined will add just a little bit more interest into the shot and make it that little bit more believable. So let's turn off the main studio lights and have a look at what we've got. Something that I'm seeing is that we've not quite got enough light on our protagonist's face, and the background lights are quite bright. So I'm just manually changing the brightness of the two lighting arms that are lighting the insides of our buildings. So I want to bring the one that is supposed to be lighting our protagonist, I want to bring that up a little bit, and I want to bring the background one down a little bit. I'm just going to position this one a little bit as well to try and get the light a little bit more onto our protagonist. Now it's very important to try and keep the lasers pointing exactly where they were, because even the slightest adjustments are going to change the trajectories of those lasers and potentially set them off to a different angle. Which has happened a little bit, so I'll just change those. Now you're probably thinking, streetlights aren't red, and you'd be absolutely right. The fact that we're going to be making this black and white means that we can ignore the fact that the lasers are red, because, well, black and white, everything's going to look normal. In fact, it's going to give us a little bit of extra control in post-processing, because we can select just the red channel, just the red light, and be able to change the brightnesses of those lights specifically, as opposed to the lights lighting the buildings. So let's have a look at what this looks like through the camera now. I've got one last adjustment to make, other than giving this sidewalk a little bit of an extra dust down here, because you can see some extra dust. Oh, try not to move it too much. I'm going to use a reflector just on this side, just here, so that this light coming out of the windows is reflected back onto the opposite face of our little protagonist, our subject, and that's going to give it just a little bit of extra light coming in here without adding an extra actual light source. And that should make the foreground just a little bit brighter than the background, because there's a lot going on back there, but it should just give that extra little push to be able to recognise what's going on with our protagonist. Okay, I'm pretty much there with this shot, I think. It's looking pretty Blade Runner-y, actually, which I'm not opposed to. It's not what I was going for, so I'm going to run this over to the computer and get that iconic black and white film noir look. Maybe we can do a sci-fi Blade Runner-esque one another time, so make sure to subscribe for that. For now, though, let's have a look at this on the computer. So I've got my image open here in camera raw, so I've been shooting in raw, so we'll be making some adjustments in here before we go in to clone out all of these stray bits of dust which are still in there despite all of the dusting that I've done. The main thing that I wanted to show you before we turn our shot to black and white is these adjustments just here that you can make. The red laser lights, you can keep this shot in colour just by adjusting the hue of only the red, which is very, very handy if you wanted a shot like this to be still in colour. You can adjust all of these just a little bit independently, and you can do that with black and white as well. So if we turn it to black and white and then go back to these adjustments, you'll see that we've still got all of the colours here, and that means that we can change the levels of only certain colours. So those street lights, if you wanted them to be a little bit sort of brighter like a street light would be, you can absolutely do that. And the same for sort of the yellows and the oranges of our minifigure here. You can select those and adjust them independently if you want to bring his face up a little bit and make him stand out. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to whiz through this, edit a little bit, not making major adjustments, and let's see what we get. So there you go, guys. I'm really happy with the shot that I've got today. Very grainy and noir, and there's a couple of extra ones there as well that I got just by moving the camera around a little bit and trying different angles, but using the same techniques. Now make sure to subscribe if you want some more macro subject ideas and technique tips, and more Lego shots. So I've still got a lot more Lego to shoot around my house, including Slave 1 here. I'm not sure what I can do with that, but I'm sure I'll give it a go at some point. Let us know what you think down in the comments, and give us a like whilst you're down there, and I'll see you next time.